New Code NLP. Some of you might not have heard what New Code NLP is. This is the branch of NLP that was created by John Grinder and Carmen Bostic St after John's departure from Richard. And it's been evolving over time. Michael Carroll has had some contributions. And New Code NLP is actually where I started learning my NLP practice. So I highly recommend learning it. However, I wanted to do a bit of a video on the differences between New Code NLP, metaphors of movement, and actually what's going on underneath the surface. I had a fabulous gentleman reach out to me recently who just learned New Code NLP. So he asked me, Dale, what are the differences? So I thought I'd share it with you. So for those of you who don't know, New Code NLP, to give it its base format, you use space. So ultimately, you find a space on the floor and you anchor a problem context to that space. Okay. So yeah, let's just say in front, you pick a circle, you see where the problem context is. The next step is to essentially disconnect or disassociate that person from that problem context. You can use fractionation or a whole host of other tools to do that. Ultimately, you want them to be in a clean state, quote unquote, clean state. Ultimately, the state that is not the context. Then what proceeds is a new code game. Now, a new code game, there are a variety. You've got the alphabet game, you've got NASA, but all of these new code games have a fair few ingredients to them. But ultimately, the way I perceive it at least, is the aim of these games is to activate multiple parts within the brain, multiple regions within the brain itself. There's a lot of bilateral movement. So for example, in NASA, for example, you move the eyes left, right, up and down. And in the alphabet game, for example, you're moving opposite legs and arms. So you're actually stimulating both sides of the hemisphere. Now, in addition, there are other aspects. In some of them, there are aspects of focus and visualization. So we can look at foveal vision and peripheral vision, so the ability to focus and the ability to see distant. We've got, sometimes they use numbers, but there's a lot of movement and a lot of space. And ultimately, it's the job of the practitioner to facilitate the person into what's called an optimized state, getting their neurology all open, and then you move them swiftly into the problem context. Now, some people might say this is just an anchor collapse, and I would agree to an extent. Now, but if we're looking at some of the challenges with standard anchoring in NLP, is normally when you're anchoring a state, you think of something positive, think of something negative, and ultimately you collapse. That's a very basic example. Very poor example. I'll do that again. So let's imagine, I don't know, lack of self-confidence. Picture that on one side, and then what you do is you get the person to feel it, you anchor that, picture confidence, intensify, and ultimately, when they were in a situation where they were unconfident, we're automatically looking to bring them into confidence. So that's how a standard anchor collapse works, and we see that in hypnosis, NLP, and a lot of other different modalities. Now, one of the challenges that I've had with certain anchoring techniques, at least from my perspective, is if you're getting the client to tell you what resource they need, that can be problematic. One of the activities in NLP is called the circle of excellence. You put a circle on the floor with a problem context to the side, and you get the person to think about what resources they would need. Now, one of the challenges I see with this is, do they know what resources they need? Now, they might consciously know some, but unconsciously they might not know. So there can be certain limitations if we focus on what the client's conscious awareness is. We might want to incorporate other unconscious resources, which can be done in a variety of different ways, including idiomotor signals. So ultimately, it is an anchor collapse, but the way I see it is it's an anchor collapse fully opening the neurology. So when somebody steps into that problem context, they have access to more choice. They have access to more options. They have access to more possibilities, neurologically speaking. I found it very useful. I found it very useful with emotional challenges, with behavioral challenges. So it can be quite useful. And some people can use it content-free. So that's New Code NLP in a nutshell. Now, metaphors of movement works slightly different. Metaphors of movement works, you essentially get the person in the problem context and you get them to elicit a metaphorical environment. So unlike New Code NLP, where you have an external context that you become clean from, and then you step in with more resources to create change, Metaphors of Movement works in a way that you have baseline state or baseline experience of context. You elicit environment, you idiomize, which allows to create deeper understanding, realizations, really makes the person feel heard and understood, which I think can be lacking from new code sometimes. But then ultimately, we're getting people to take steps in different directions as one of the base interventions to experience what's outside of that. Now, I think there's a lot of benefits to both contexts, but I want to talk about maybe some of the challenges of each. So, for example, Metaphors of Movement doesn't work to specifically change a state. It doesn't look to specifically change an emotional state or outcome. Normally, by taking steps, that can do that, but that's not its main intention. Whereas New Code NLP, it does create quite a significant change of state because ultimately the person is stuck in a certain neurological pattern where almost turning all the lights on, or a lot of the lights, opening the neurology to step in. Now, that can be really useful. It can create change swiftly. It could also potentially have challenges. I mean, let's just imagine you open that up. There are a lot of possibilities. So how do we know what possibilities are chosen is an interesting question and something maybe to explore if you're a New Code NLP practitioner. But what I find interesting and why I love Metaphors of Movement so much is because Metaphors of Movement helps you to become consciously aware of the problems and challenges you're facing. It gives you a real life understanding of your experience of what's going on under the surface. Whereas New Code NLP is very much a copy and a paste of resources. So I think it's very useful. I think it's very effective. It definitely has a place. And this is where I think it differs from Metaphors of Movement. So, I mean, I'd highly recommend studying both. New Code NLP, I learned from the NLP Academy, which is John Grinder, Carmen Bostic St, Clair, and Michael Carroll. Definitely great teachings, definitely quite abstract in presentation. But yeah, I love my experience when I learned it. So I'd highly recommend, if you're curious about learning New Code NLP, have a little gander. And obviously Metaphors of Movement, I run it. Or you can also look on the metaphorsofmovement.co.uk website, and there's also a list of upcoming training. So if my time zone doesn't work for you, there's also a few other trainers who present the work as well, some online, some in person. But yeah, I just think they're two really great modalities. They both work in two very different ways, but ultimately they work to explore your neurology. Metaphors of Movement works by taking steps within the metaphorical realm, and the idiomization, we're helping with a lot of internal neurological processes. And with New Code NLP, you're opening the brain up and then putting resources in. So that's your daily dose with Dale. This is a comparison between New Code NLP and Metaphors of Movement. And as always, keep on taking steps, and I'll catch you at the next one.